there, everybody. It's Maggie from Personal Euphoria with today's plank story. And I always love to show when I've got, which is often, my cup of Joe. So this is my cup of coffee with Joe Pilates doing Pilates. It looks to me like he's about to go into scissors in the air or bicycle in the air here. But either way, a fun move. And I would recommend for your plank story, it's probably going to be a long one, that you pick a move you like. It can be plank. It can be a variety of planks. It could be marching in place. It could be deep breathing. You could tell me in the comments what move you created today, right? So anything is fine, but let's get the clock started. Here we go. All right, so from our road trip, we had gone to Mississippi, and I was excited because I've never been to Mississippi, and it was a new state. But in my research, I will say I was struggling to come up with things to do in Mississippi, and I had reached out to people, and a lot of people were like, oh, there's nothing to do in Mississippi, skip it, there's no reason to go. I'm never going to skip a state or a place. Like, I want to see it for myself, and I was convinced I will find the good things in Mississippi. So our first experience with Mississippi, we were literally there for like 20 minutes. We drove into Biloxi at sunset, and there's like a lighthouse and a beach and this gorgeous sunset. So our first experience with Mississippi was magnificent. But I can't even say I saw Biloxi. Like, that was it. We continued on the road. And then I had wanted to spend time in the Mississippi Delta. But in doing my research, I realized I had been confused about what the Delta was. I think Delta and I think the end of a river. So I presumed the Delta and the bayou were the same thing, and that the Mississippi Delta would be along the coast. And it's not. That's the bayou in Louisiana. The Delta is in Midwestern Mississippi. And as far as I can tell, I was confusing Mississippi River for state. And it's Mississippi Delta because it's where the Yazoo River has its delta alongside the Mississippi River. But it's massive miles of basically like floodland. And I was kind of laughing. It's not fair to always judge a state in the winter, but Mississippi is called the Magnolia State. And yet my experience was everything was just brown and dead, right? So the trees were dead in the middle of winter. The grass was dead. It was brown. There's clearly flooding all over. The Mississippi River is brown, and their roads were all brown, unlike, our roads in Connecticut are black or gray. So it just looked, everything was brown. I suspect in the spring, Mississippi is a prettier place, and the people told me that was true. But so we get into the Mississippi Delta, and I'm also struck by how spaced out everything is, how rural, and how little there actually is to do. Whenever I'm driving through a part of the country that's very rural, I often wonder, like, how different are these people's lives than mine, right? Is it as different as I would think? Like, outside of a pandemic, I can, within 10 minutes, get to like 7 grocery stores and 7 movie theaters and multiple bookstores. And if you're living in the Mississippi Delta, I mean, you're driving a long way to get to a grocery store or even a convenience store. There isn't much out there. So what I always wonder, like, just how different our lives are, and maybe it's not as much as I expect. So I'm thinking about these people, and we're driving through, and we keep seeing these signs that say, finish the pumps, finish the pumps. And we Google that, and apparently in 2019, this area of the Delta flooded for 6 months, and the people lost their homes. They couldn't plant crops. So basically, they'd lost their livelihood for more than one growing season, right, and for an entire year. And they got no help or support. And I thought, this makes this place a pretty tough place to live. And I'd read years ago about living in Mississippi, before the U.S. was a country, and what a challenging place that would have been to live. And I thought, this still poses its challenges. And we get into this little town in the Delta, and pretty much all the buildings are closed, and the downtown, it's not just that everything's gone out of business, which is kind of sad because at one point it clearly was a thriving community, but the buildings are crumbling. So the businesses that are there, I'm sort of wondering like whether it's safe for people to be running businesses in here. And there's a florist. A florist has survived. And I'm curious, how does a florist survive where nothing else has survived in this community? And so it's a little bit feeling sketchy, and we park the RV, and I say to Matt, like, do you think it's safe? I mean, it's really dilapidated and run down here, but there's also not many people. And everything's fine. We take a short walk. And then we move the RV to a place we're going to pick up food for dinner. And we're parked a block away. You can totally see the RV. And as we're walking into the restaurant, this woman says, you sure you want to leave the RV there? Don't you want to bring it closer so you have a better eye on it? And we're like, oh, it seems okay. And then we order our food at this place with a ton of character and really good food. And we we take another little walk around the block, and another woman says to us, "Hey, you enjoying your walk? It's a nice day, huh?" But her tone makes us think like, you know what? All these people are commenting, maybe we don't know this area and we should get back in our RV and wait. And we do. And I remember thinking, you know, these people didn't have to say anything to us, and they weren't like super direct, like this might not be the safest place, get back in your car. But they made a point to be looking out for us. And everyone that I met in Mississippi was really friendly. In fact, you'd start getting in conversation with them, and it was hard to get out of conversation. They would just engage you and start telling you these stories that were interesting or suggesting where you stay and things to do. And so I came away from Mississippi feeling like, you know, it might be a challenging place to live, certainly parts of it, and it might not have as much as I'm used to, but the people there are making the most of what they have, and they were kind and thoughtful and very decent to me. And I have to say, in my travels, that's what I often find. You know, whatever you expect, my engagement with most people, most places, is ultimately really positive. But one win I can say, no doubt, for Mississippi, outside of Tupelo, where it gets less flat when you're like more northern and outside of the Delta, it becomes more rolling hills and kind of could look like Connecticut in some ways. So it's what I'm used to and seems prettier to me. But they had, hands down, the best ribs I've ever put in my mouth. So if you like barbecue, Mississippi might be the place for you. Anyway, that is a 6-minute plank. I got to break up these stories from some of our travels, but like a 6-minute plank. I hope you guys feel good, keep moving. And if you've been to Mississippi or are from Mississippi and you have a reason I should go back, I'm still willing to go back. I wouldn't rule out Mississippi the way some people would. Anyway, have a great day.